Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee?
I don't drink coffee.
You sure? It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another very late morning grind. I'm sorry, I tried to get to sleep early to get everything, to reset my day, and boy, I failed. Yesterday, I basically dedicated all day to writing because I just decided, hey, I got to get back to writing. So I did that, and then I took some sleeping pills to make sure I got to bed on time, but that also meant that I just didn't wake up. So here I am. Let's see who we got here. Theo is here. Cringe random name. Hello. Mike is here. Don? Good to see you, Don. Let's see. Robert is here. Hello, everybody. Poor Steve King. Good morning. Yeah, sleep has been weird. I don't like being too reactive. I like having the schedule going forward. And of course, while all of that was going on, it seems like everything was reacting back and forth, reacting to stuff. And that's not really the way I like to be. So that's why I was trying to get back on schedule. And I think we can talk about that as far as productivity, because we used to do a lot more productivity on this channel, particularly before all of the RPG stuff hit. And we should be keeping ourselves accountable to making sure that we are doing what we want to be doing, and making sure our day does exactly what it needs to be doing. And so I thought that's one of the topics we could get back to here on Sunday. Because Sunday we typically just take a look at some different topics that I don't think will take an entire hour to look at. So that's one of them that I think we'll do that at the end here. I also got some Pantone color stuff in, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen those before. So I've got those that we can take a look at. But one of the things I wanted to look at, one of the things that, let me turn on my screen sharing, was we went over the Cypher system. That was 2 days ago or something like that. And we saw that they had a license, and they had an open license, but it's not the OGL 1.0A. I remember seeing that Monty Cook had tweeted out that, hey, we just put our Cypher system out under an open license for people to use. We tried to work very hard on it. We I thought about it a lot. Worked out very hard on it, put it out, and now that was right when the OGL 1.0 stuff hit, and then people started to be skeptical of it. I looked at it. It's a short license. We didn't look at it yesterday. We just saw the announcement that it was there, or 2 days ago. We just saw the announcement that it was there, and then went on to look at the system. But then I thought it was interesting that somebody put in the comments right after we got started, or right after we were no longer live, but on replay, that said, just a heads up, the Cypher System license does have a morality clause. And so I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. We should at least look at it, because that's been a big thing. That was a big deal with what Wizards of the Coast was trying to do. I know that it was discussed a lot in the Discord server for the orc license, and what exactly the situation is, whether or not a morality clause or something like that is something they need. And I think that the solution they came to is that no, it doesn't. But I thought that we could talk about that, and we could take a look at a couple of different licenses and just see what they say about some type of morality clause, and we can have a discussion about it as to whether we think it's good, bad, too much, too little, whatever else. Yeah, and it's so hard. Why is it so difficult to have the perfect day? Why is it so difficult to have the perfect day? What the perfect day is, we should be able to write that down, and we should do it. But it is difficult. So we're going to try to get right back to that. We had the idea of the first of New Year, and then we had Chinese New Year a week ago. So there's that space when you have the Gregorian New Year, and then before you actually hit the Chinese New Year, which is when the lunar calendar aligns. And I've heard that time between those things called the Jade Tunnel, the time that is neither here nor there, and I kind of like that. And so it's kind of like, it wasn't a perfect alignment, but it was all the Wizards of the Coast stuff kind of happened in the Jade Tunnel. And now here we are officially in the year of the Water Rabbit. So now we should be getting underway, and we need to hit this hard. Joseph Carter says, Orc conclusion, no morality clause planned in no uncertain term. There's just no way to do it, we concluded. That, breathe and sip, exactly. So there's just no way, good way to do it. I agree. So we can talk about that. And there is, it looked like that conversation had been archived on the Orc discussion board. But I was in there looking through, and, we're talking about, well, here, let's breathe and sip, like Stray was talking about. Then we'll get into it, and we'll bring up the Cypher System license. If you're new here, we should breathe. We do this twice. Breathe deeply, and then completely exhale. Deep breath, complete exhale, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. I just have water. Okay, there we go. So let me bring up this. So, I think we have to talk about, if we're going to talk about this subject, what are we talking about here that the Orc would do, or this license would do? We're talking about licensing game rules. And we did talk quite a bit about this with Ryan Dancy, who was saying that it's not like this wasn't something that was thought about when the OGL 1.0 was created. This idea of, how do you make, because there are two different issues. One of them is the management of a brand or a trademark. And we certainly understand if somebody's trying to manage the Dungeons and Dragons brand, for instance, there are things that they may or may not want that to be associated with. And that would certainly be the case in the kind of brand that I'm creating or anything like that. And I think for a lot of people as well. So managing how that brand is used is certainly important and something that anybody who is running a brand or something like that would want to have control over. Okay. But it's important to note they didn't put the brand under an open license. Nobody's talking about putting a brand under the open license. All of these open licenses that we're looking at are for particular systems of rules. So if you're going to use an open license, if you're going to use an open license for something, and it's for a rules system, is that the place for some type of morality clause? And if so, what would it look like? And of course, as Joseph is talking about here, the orc community decided that no, it's just not some place to do, not the correct place to do that for an open license for a rules system. And Ryan Dancy's idea there was that he said, well, if that, you don't want to patrol that, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have to police that either, because then you, if something gets by, you're as guilty as the person who published it. That he said the correct answer for Wizards at the time was to say that, well, if somebody publishes something under the OGL that's just terrible, and some media outlet comes up to Wizards and says, hey, did you know that this book got published? What's up with this book being published with this rule system? They can say their answer is very easy. Their answer was, we don't have anything to do with that. We don't have anything to do with that publication. That was published under an open license, and we condemn it. Very simple, very easy. To try to take on a whole bunch of, to try to specify that was not something they wanted to take on. Now, that was different for the D20 license. In fact, I wonder if we could pull up the D20 license. Find like an archive of that, something like that, and see how it differed from the OGL. D20 license, original D20 license, because we were looking at the Book of Erotic Fantasy to see if we could get one and see what was in it, and somebody donated to the Book of Erotic Fantasy Fund to pick one up on eBay. So we can actually see what was in it and what its situation is. And I happened to be looking on eBay at the front and back of that book, and I thought that it had the D20 license on it, the D20 logo on it, and it did not. I thought that it did. So I was looking at the front and back of the book on scans on eBay or pictures that were taken on eBay, and it did not say D20 license. It did say OGL compatible, but it did not say D20 license. So we need to look at that in more detail, because I thought the controversy around that had to do with the D20 license, and it did not. Apparently, it did not have that logo on it. So we'll have to make sure we understand what's going on there correctly. All right. Joseph says, the other angle is what's offensive in a global context. It'll vary widely. It will. Chase says, the problem with the morality clause is in the enforcement of it. I think we'd just see one creator getting away with something while another might get hammered on it due just to interpretation. James says, morality clause is a clause included except for when a contract for a high visibility individual in order to attempt to control without naming specific terms under which control can be exercised. Let's say that again. Morality clause, this is James Bacon here. Morality clause is a clause included except when in a contract for a high visibility individual in order to attempt to control without naming specific terms under which control can be exercised. Yeah, these things are very vague. Joseph says, do you really want a mob of people whose opinions that aren't necessarily yours at the doorstep demanding you enforce your morality clause against somebody else? I don't. And, that was part of the really weird part of, well, many weird parts, but that was a weird part of the 1.01 leak that basically said, hey, we can do whatever we want in this, but the way that we're going to be enforcing, the way we'll know if we go too far is if we're mobbed on Twitter or something's going wrong. We wondered if it went both ways. When I first read it, I kind of thought that it was implying that, well, if we start striking stuff that the community doesn't want us to strike, then we'll hear about it on social media and know we went too far. And I thought, well, that's like, you're going to adjudicate this by a Twitter mob, because there was no recourse to any type of other legal action or anything like that. It was just saying that social media would let them know if something was going wrong. And that seems ridiculous. I was saying that, so that means that if you're a publisher and you publish something, but for some reason you don't have a big following on Twitter, for instance, and they get rid of you and you tweet this out, you may not get a whole bunch of traction. And so, well, your number of Twitter followers is determining whether or not you can actually get some type of recourse on this. And that it should have no bearing on whether or not how much social media popularity you've got. That would be why you would have like recourse to the law or something like that, right? Because it doesn't have to do with your personal popularity as to whether or not you're in violation of some type of rule or something. But that's the way they wanted it. But I also wondered, it was brought up, does that go the other way? If social media gets whipped up into a frenzy and is like, oh my God, look at this book over here, I think that's offensive. Can they put pressure on Wizards and go, oh, Wizards, says, maybe we do need to strike something for a morality clause because social media got whipped up into a frenzy. It just seems a bit, that seems like a terrible way to work this. Nephenor says, morality clauses are the bane of creativity, as no matter how you word it, you can end up with someone banning a perfectly normal book. Wait, you need to look at the book of erotic fantasy? I have one. You have one? Well, we thought about, let's rephrase this. Do I need to look at the book of erotic fantasy? No, I do not need to look at the book of erotic fantasy. But it's just come up so often, we thought that it might be interesting to do a morning grind show where we do actually take a look at all the controversy surrounding that book so that we understand what it was. But then also, I would only want to do that if I actually had a book in hand so that we could actually look at the book and see what was in it, so we understand the controversy and actually what was in the text. That one won't be for everybody, but I would want to actually understand what was in the text so that we can evaluate it on this type of stuff. I have no idea what was actually in the book. I have no idea. So I'd want to actually know if to study something like that. Okay, so let's take a look at the open license. So this is the open license that Cypher System had created, and it's not all that long. So you do get to say, I don't want to read the whole thing. We'll get to the morality clause. But okay, so this does say that they put out their own system reference document, a CSRD, the Cypher System reference document. And I don't want to feel like I'm calling out the Monty Cook games or anything like that, because I'm really not. It just came up as an example, and we've been studying different RPG. We make an RPG on Tuesdays, and as a result of that, or as part of that, we had taken a look at a bunch of different games and what licenses they were licensed under, if they were licensed under any, so that we understand what we can use when we're doing RPG creation. So that's why we were looking at different licenses. Obviously, we were looking at different licenses because all the 1.0a stuff was going on. But this one, we didn't get to this one when we were looking at different licenses because we hadn't actually looked at Cypher System yet. And so I thought it was interesting that this one does, because I hadn't seen the morality clause in anything that was under 1.0a. And really, Creative Commons doesn't have one, right? Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. There's nothing in there about morality, right? We're going to go over and look at it, but I believe there's nothing in there about morality. So those hadn't, but what Wizards was trying to do did, and then I was told that, well, this one does as well. So they did put out a system reference document, and then saying that you can include compatible with Cypher System on the cover of the work, or by including the compatible with Cypher System logo on the cover of the work, or by including these items on any advertising, promotion, press release, or affiliate documents affiliated with the work. you indicate your acceptance of the terms of the agreement when you do this. So this is the rule system as well. He's got different worlds that he's made, which are not being licensed, but this is just for the rule system. And of course, this is just for the text. So you can use our text, because I might want to do something for the Cypher system here. Seems popular. But so we can use all of the text of the CSRD, which remember is important because that is the expression, the canonical expression of the Cypher system rules. So you're able to directly copy those rules over to your book so that you know you're compatible. You don't have to think of new ways to write the Cypher system rules. The work must include the phrase compatible with the Cypher system or compatible with the Cypher system logo on the cover of the work. How do we feel about that? I've thought different ways about that. I mean, it's kind of a big deal to say what needs to be on the cover. Now, does that mean that it can be on the back cover? This doesn't explicitly say front cover. So I wonder if that could be the back cover if you're creating a book. Because what logo it is must include the phrase compatible with the Cypher system or compatible with the Cypher system logo on the work. Some people might not want that on the cover of their book. Is the back cover just fine? I mean, the D20 logo would go on the back of the book. How do we feel about something, especially who would make you put something on the front of your book? Vision says 100% correct. The easiest way to solve the morality issue is to let players govern themselves. It works in all regions. It works at different tables. And a company can maintain it, neutrality. Robert says, morality clauses these days are being pushed from corporations, but the source are not the employees or the subsidiary. It's the owner and the investors or hedge funds. It's called ESG. Yeah, Mike says it's kind of like prosecuting and defining porn from the 70s. The ESG is environmental, social, and governance. OGL was in the crosshairs for the social part of that. Trey says, I think that instead of a morality clause, it might be better that some kind of rating system similar to the film industry. That way people could decide if they want the product and market to decide. Yeah, the issue is, I mean, because I was saying that there was certain material that if I published, I'd want people to be able to know that, hey, if you're looking for something for your 8-year-old, 11-year-old nephews or nieces, this is probably not it. And of course, when you're looking at a 400-page book, that can be difficult to determine on the shelf, right? Like, is there anything in this book? But something like PG, something like that might help in those situations. And Joseph says, yeah, popularity is the problem. Twitter is a real poor judge of morality. Tark 1187 says, morality is defined by the collective. In this case, the group playing the game. Now, that's a good point. Joseph says, not to put too fine a point on it, the social media frenzy is what we just did to Hasbro WotC. That's true. That's true. Let me go down here to the actual morality part of this. So, but you do have to put the following text in there. Now, I don't have any kind of problem with this. When you're putting in the legal and copyright information, the following text, this product is the independent production and not, this is telling you right here, this product is an independent production and is not affiliated with Monte Cook Games, LLC. It's published under the open license. That way, that seems like a great line to me. Because that way you can go publish whatever you want. And then it says on the book that this is not affiliated at all with, Monte Cook Games. So if something comes up, well, Monte Cook can say, listen, it even says in that book, that's not affiliated with me. I have no affiliation with that. I did not approve it. And in fact, I condemn it if in fact he condemns it or whatever. That seems like a good system to me. And then you recognize the Cypher system and its logo or trademarks of Monte Cook Games and in the USA and other countries. Okay. See, this work may or may not use or incorporate the System Cypher logo, the MCG logo, or any other trademark except for the compatible with Cypher Systems logo. He does say that you may use any authorized version of the compatible with the Cypher Systems logo. Gotcha. This was very similar to the OGL in the sense that other than to acknowledge that the work was produced or distributed under this agreement, neither the work nor any advertising, promotions, press release, or other documents affiliated with the work may contain any claim that you or the work has been sanctioned or approved by the MCG. See, that seems to be the way you go, to me. Okay, but here we go right here. So this would be, I guess, the morality clause that people were calling out. And this one does seem rather strong to me. Neither the work nor any advertising, promotions, press releases, or other documents affiliated with the work. That's very broad, I think. Or other documents affiliated with the work may contain racist, homophobic, discriminatory, or other repugnant views, overt political agendas or views. I thought that was a strange one. Overt political views. So other documents affiliated with the work cannot contain overt political views. Depictions or descriptions of criminal violence against children, rape, or other acts of criminal perversion or other obscene material. So that's the way that Monty Cook Games words this. The work, which is what you're publishing, advertising, promotion, press release, or other documents affiliated with the work may contain racist, homophobic, discriminatory, or other repugnant views, overt political agendas or views, depictions or descriptions of criminal violence against children, rape or other criminal perversion or obscene material. Let me catch up on some of the chat while people think about that, because I was thinking about that yesterday. I was like, really, this one seems very strong. Robert says, if you see press about so-called toxic fandoms, that's what that's about. They use the social to restrict funding to corporations that police their industry and fandoms for ideological purity. Joseph says, I think I was still a minor the first time the book of erotic fantasy was printed in pre-3E. TSR sued, if memory serves, because of course they did. It wasn't permitted by my Flags, the friendly local gaming store owner, to look at it, but have since. Joseph says, it's rated I for immature in most places, but I don't find it offensive as such. I don't want it at my table. But if you do, how am I harmed by that? Yeah, so this is, and he talks about the Numenor world, hate the Cypher system, not crunchy enough, Nephenor says. So yeah, the world is not something that is open licensed. So that's the distinction between just the system and then the rule system and the Numenor itself. Yeah, Joseph Carter says, if it doesn't say the front, it can be on the back. Now, actually, as it happens, I'm thinking for a particular line of mine, I wouldn't mind having it on the front. But on other circumstances, I certainly would. But I would say that it doesn't actually specify that it has to be the front. So I would say that it could probably be on the back where you're putting everybody else's logos and other publishers' logos and things like that. That seems to be the case to me. Yeah, so it doesn't say front explicitly. Well, we were just saying that, Don, that the orc appears that the orc community seems to have definitively rejected any type of morality clause in its opening draft. Yeah, see, repugnant views. That's, yeah. We talked, the vagueness here is so interesting. That repugnant views, I have no idea what those are. And overt, okay, so here, let me scroll down, but then I'll give my thoughts on here. See what people are saying. Cornelia says, if you write for another system, why wouldn't you want something on the front letting people know that? Well, you might in many cases, but in a lot of cases, the D20 stuff had that on the back. I mean, if you look on the back and see what it's compatible with, the logo could be on the back. On the front, that one actually says that you can put the words or the logo on it, but Savage Worlds, I think, actually has something about the logo that you have to put Savage Worlds on the front. So, I don't know. I mean, I can see both ways, but you may certainly want it. I'm just saying that it's strange to require it, that I wouldn't want to require it, because the look of a book, the trade dress of some type of books that are coming out, it may be better to put it on the back cover or something like that. So I wouldn't do that. But, okay, so when I was looking at this, I was okay, you can't contain racist, homophobic, or discriminatory or other repugnant views. But you know what? I was like, well, now, okay, well, would any of my stuff have any of this in it? Well, it's so vague that it's difficult to tell. But so I was reading this, but then yesterday when I went to start writing, I was reading this, and then I pulled up my document to start writing in Tales of Rabavania. And you know what? I started writing, like, just by chance, immediately as I was, went over to my document to start writing. By chance, I happened to be writing in the section on the witches, and I was talking about how the witches, the church in Rabavania, the current mainstream religion, has become rather aggressive in pursuit of the witches. They didn't really appreciate the religion of witchcraft in general, but have become increasingly hostile to the witches. And so most of the practicing witches in the world live on the sort of the fringes or the outskirts, or at least sort of more remote parts of the countryside, where the church-like organization doesn't have a whole lot of influence. Or there are some covens of witches that operate kind of secretly inside more, shall we say, civilized Rabavania. And so I was writing all of that, and then I went, wait a minute, because this was on my mind. I'm sitting here writing about how the witches are discriminated against in this world because of their religion. And then I went, wait a minute, so would that violate this morality clause? Because I'm definitely sitting here talking about how one group within the game world is definitely discriminated against and actively on the receiving end of hostilities because of their religious beliefs. So absolutely, there is, that would be, I suppose, discriminatory conduct within the game world. So is that running afoul of this? Discriminatory views, is that discrimination within the world book that I couldn't have? Yeah, the witches situation. Someone would call that repugnant. Yeah. And it just seems like it's not a situation that Monty Cook would want to have to adjudicate. We're using him as an example because we just discovered this part. We're part of this. This is why we're using this. I don't know him personally at all or anything like that. So I don't know exactly what he would do in these situations. He hasn't told me, and this hasn't come up as far as I know. But that's exactly the same would be true. Kit says the same would be true for elves hating dwarves and vice versa. Right, any type of enmity between elves and dwarves. And, that seems like something that is present in a lot of fantasy worlds. That, okay, wait, and especially if you're going to have conflict in the story, hey, we've got certain groups that don't like one another. How do you get around that? I wanted to go up here, though, with other documents affiliated with the work. So, see, one of my lines is, hey, could we make something like a Game of Thrones? So, HBO, Game of Thrones, well, let's say A Song of Ice and Fire, the works of literature, the written works, A Song of Ice and Fire, and then HBO, Game of Thrones TV show, and then the House of the Dragon TV show. I've been a fan of all of those. Now, of course, we have the issue with the way that Game of Thrones ended on HBO. Let's not get into that. But generally speaking, I'm a fan of those. And I often use a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire as kind of an example when I'm trying to give a shorthand for what my world of Theophany would be like, because I intend it to be an adult fantasy environment on the level of HBO's Game of Thrones. I often say that as kind of shorthand for the kind of material that would be in it, the kinds of material that can be addressed by it. Which, so I would say, according to this morality clause, could you do a document or a game based on a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire? It seems like it would definitely be hard, right? Or impossible. I do wonder about this. Overt political agendas or views. I was trying to think about a Song of Ice and Fire in that. When I think that the Song of Ice and Fire stories happen to have a lot of information or happen to be about leadership. Now, whether or not they're doing that effectively, as the stories just haven't been gotten written and things, a lot of people consider it kind of dragging as the written works have gone on, is not relevant here. But I think there is a tremendous amount in that story that is about the qualifications of leadership, what it takes to be an effective leader, and the qualities necessary for effective governance. I think people would say, well, that's not overt. It's not an overt political views, because clearly, if you're reading those stories, and George R.R. Martin has sort of talked about this in interviews and such, that he does have certain political views on what attributes do and do not make good leaders, right? And I think that comes through in the story. He's got a variety of different characters. They try a variety of different strategies and philosophies of leadership, some of which are effective and some of which are not. And we're exploring this in a story environment. I don't think that a lot of people, when they are just reading through, necessarily get that. So it might not be an overt view or agenda. So maybe it has it, but maybe it would fail on the overt part. Maybe it actually takes some level of analysis on that subject in order to not be overt. But other people may completely disagree with that. That, the game, when you're reading A Song of Ice and Fire, you definitely have some overt political views in here. Yeah, we're having exactly this problem in these very vague ways. Well, but see, Chaos Incarna says, I don't make settings in D&D based off my political views, but you'll see an active niche nature of more left-leaning people forcing modern politics into settings. It's very heavily leaning one way. But you don't, what I would say is that you don't have to, you may or may not make a setting based off of your political views. But this isn't talking about whether or not it's, like, in this one right here is not talking about whether or not it's your political views. It's just talking about, are there overt political views? Joseph Carter says, overt politics almost always means not mine. And in 2019, some said BBEG is an orc. BBEG is an orc is racism. Racism genuinely is disgusting, but that was getting ridiculous. BBEG is orc. I don't know what that is. Robert says, if you read the 1.2, the morality clause was really a diversity and inclusion imposed by Hasbro that was imposed by the ESG investors. That's where the push against dark elves and orcs, etc. We've studied orcs quite a bit on this channel, and the demonic nature of orcs and the evolution toward being more human. I want to talk more about that. Yeah, see, okay. See, Nephenor says, nope, impossible. Remember, there's rape in A Song of Ice and Fire. Of course, there is exactly that in A Song of Ice and Fire. And is there criminal violence against children? Absolutely. Absolutely. What happens when the Mountain, during the sack of King's Landing at the end of Robert's Rebellion, and the Mountain comes in and smashes, which child was it, up against the wall and crushes the skull? There's absolutely criminal violence against children. Now, I was trying to look up briefly and getting some kind of definition of criminal perversion, which I didn't immediately get. But rape or other acts of criminal perversion definitely present in those books. Definitely depictions and descriptions of criminal violence against children. And definitely people would say there is other obscene material in there. And of course, I mean, there's all these other things. And of course, it doesn't even have to be that the author promotes these things. It's their presence within the story as these things are worked into the story, and then you're setting up conflict and whatever else. Okay, but so let's say that. So we think I agree right here. That seems like no. We have over 100 people active on actually on the Discord server right now. I know there are about over 300 people who have joined, but over 100 people are actually active right now. This is great. So let's say my next thing I was thinking was, okay, let's say that we agree that, okay, this means that we could not use the Cypher system to create something that has to do with A Song of Ice and Fire or a Game of Thrones. Or at least that we could not include any of these things in that book. So at first, you might say the work. See, under most morality clauses, I would say that it needs to be regarding the work. If it's going to exist, which I'm against, but if it were, then what the morality clause would be about is the work that's being produced. The work cannot contain this list of stuff. But as we saw, in the wizard situation, it was not only that the work could not contain certain things, it was also talking about what the conduct of the person who was creating it had to be, which was completely on a different level, right? That your personal conduct could not be something like something obscene. If you were doing something obscene, your personal conduct, even if it wasn't present in the work, would still be a justification for revoking a license, which we didn't pick up on the very first time we read through it, but we should have. So that was actually went beyond evaluating the work and into the conduct of somebody who was writing it. You couldn't be involved in illegal or obscene conduct. This one doesn't talk about obscene conduct or illegal conduct or whatever kind of conduct that the person may be involved in. It is examining certain things. But what it's examining is very broad. The work, any advertising, promotions, press releases, or other documents affiliated with the work. Okay, so not your conduct, but these things. So let's say that you've written a book. So if I write a Song of Ice and Fire RPG, is the Song of Ice and Fire book a document affiliated with the work? I would say so. I mean, it doesn't seem like it could not be, right? I mean, it seems like it would certainly be to me. So you might say, okay, we got this book here in a hypothetical situation that does depict the criminal violence against children. That is in this book. That is in this story. It's a part of this story. But I want to make a Cypher System RPG out of it. So if it were just regarding the work I'm about to produce, I could say, hey, you know what? There's only so many words in this book anyway, that I'm about to be writing this work. So I tell you what, I'll just leave out, if that's a big deal, I'll just leave out the criminal violence against children. I won't mention any of that. I won't bring up as a plot point, the Mountain smashing that kid's skull or anything like that. I'll just leave it out of the work, except for you would seem to still be in violation. I will leave it out of my RPG book. So even if you wrote the RPG book, it seems like here, to eliminate all of that, the document that is still the original story is still a document affiliated with the work. And so it just seems like this would be a hard no. This seems like it would be a hard no, the way I'm reading it. So Tark says you cannot live life without discrimination or bias. Having personal standards, having personal preferences means you are discriminating against one thing or another. You have a bias. Robert says you couldn't even use Robert E. Howard or H.P. Lovecraft. Products their time, but there it is, the wholesale destruction of literature, art, creation, and freedoms, really. Yeah, well, that's big bad evil guy. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the whole comment in context. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, yeah. That's right. That's right. Right. How could I forget that? Right. Yes. He got pushed out of that window. Attempted murder, crippling. Right. Very, very much from the beginning. So let's see. It seems like if you wanted to do something, now we're talking about a morality clause in the context of an open license for game rules. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the rules of the game. We're not talking about somebody's. Now, admittedly, there is a trademark on Cypher System. He's telling you can, the Cypher System logo is trademark. But we're not talking about any of his worlds. We're talking about how do we license game rules under an open license. Because if you're not doing this under an open license, I mean, anything goes, right? So, I mean, the idea that because we said it's very important if you're running a brand to be able to protect your brand. And I don't have any problem with that, especially if you're negotiating one-on-one with somebody. For instance, I'm working on Rabivania, and I want that to be a family-friendly story. And so one of the things I'm not doing is I'm not going to put the Tales of Rabivania under an open license. That wouldn't be something that I would do. So if somebody wanted to use Rabivania, they would have to contact me directly and say, hey, I'm creating this product or whatever, and I think it would go great with the Tales of Rabivania. Lots of sales opportunities or whatever. Are you on board? Well, one of the things I want to know is what type of material they're creating. And if they were trying to create some, sexual content, then that would be a no. So there would definitely be limitations on what you could or could not do with that. The problem that we're addressing here is the idea of morality clauses in open licenses for game rules and how we don't think it's working. Lots of comments here. I'm scrolling through. Well, see, Sammy 3D says, what form of conflict is left for storytelling? I mean, right. Stories are born out of conflict. So you are you're being rather limited here. And Star Wars, I guess, is out right here. Does Star Wars depict criminal violence against children? Yeah, it does. Anakin Skywalker goes and cuts open a bunch of children in the Jedi Temple, right? So I would say that, I would say that it more so than A Song of Ice and Fire contains overt political agendas or views. And it does contain criminal violence against children. So something like Star Wars, I suppose, would not be allowed under this morality clause, right? I mean, would combat go against this? I guess it depends on, it depends on what your definition of obscene is, I suppose. So that has to, let me scroll down because we're going to take a look at what Fate and Evil Hat says in just a second. And it's very short. This has been a great conversation. So looks like we don't need our other topics today. So a PC party couldn't break up a child slave ring run by the Zentarim. Aren't the villains supposed to be evil? Indy couldn't liberate the Temple of Doom in this context. Yeah, see that? Yeah, exactly. So you're severely, if you want your bad guys to be really evil, like Darth Vader killing children, that way your heroes can stop this kind of thing. You do have to depict it and show it. or you have to depict it in some way, right? If you want your bad guys to be involved in some really evil stuff. Oh, yeah, that's true. Of course, Luke is how old at this time? He's like a prime age military male, though. So I'm not sure if it would be violence against children if Luke were killed. Good morning, Judy. W3 Techie says, legally, though, adding a morality clause just depends whatever the local courts already have in place. There's already no chance of it. There's really no chance of it doing anything else in a license. The local laws take precedence. Yeah, the nose play says villains by definition have to be offensive. So anyway, there seems to be a lot of issues that I would have here thinking about it, and we thought up here that if I were Monty Cook, would not want to have to adjudicate, and wouldn't want to have people. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about that is that, well, like, what if I had my situation with the witches, which I was describing them being discriminated against in Rabavania. So if I said, hey, will you please review this Monty Cook games, which is what they're trying to not do. If you put out an open license, you may not have the manpower or the desire to read through a bunch of stuff to decide what, everybody submit your books to me, which Ryan Dancy said that had been something done with Fudge, that, hey, here's the license, but I've got to review all of your work. And if they're only before you put the emblem on it or talk about it being compatible or use the rules, it can be, you can do that. You're absolutely welcome to do that. And if you only have like 3 or 4 things that people are going to publish, maybe you can review it all and then say, hey, this is good or this is not or whatever. But especially under an open license, when you could potentially have thousands and thousands of people publishing, you don't want to have to review that yourself for whatever that is. But let's just say that I said, hey, here's my material. Will you please review this to make sure that it doesn't run afoul of any of the morality elements of this? And here's the witches here, and they're not, they're discriminated against by this other religion here in this world. Well, what if they come back and say, oh, that's fine. We were just talking about real world racism, homophobic, discriminatory. You got a fantasy world here. Your fantasy world, you've got this particular religion that's being discriminated against by another religion, but neither of those are real world religions. This is clearly a fantasy world. Go for it. Okay, if they wanted to say that, then I think they would have said real world. Like, if I were writing this and I wanted to make that clear, I would have said may not contain real world racism, homophobic, discriminatory, or other repugnant views, overt real world political agendas. That's going to be very difficult to determine anyway, whether it's an overt real world political agenda or a political agenda within a fantasy world. That one would be difficult. Or depictions of criminal violence against children. That one doesn't seem like it has a good real world, fantasy world division. Neither does rape or other acts of criminal perversion or obscene material. Those don't. But you could say, at least up here, it would at least appear to me to be somewhat coherent to say may not contain real world racist, homophobic, or discriminatory material. But then, as soon as I said that, or was thinking that to myself, well, maybe he meant to say real world up here. Why can't it contain deal with real world issues? Because immediately, as soon as I said that, I went, hey, you know what? Do I have those, or have I just seen them? Like World War II. There are GURPS books that deal with World War II and other historical real world situations. We're not limited to, with RPGs to just talk about, fantasy stuff. There have definitely been real world RPG source books written, the World War II being one of them. But I mean, obviously, medieval Europe, Greece, Rome, China, the Aztecs, you name it. There's probably been real world source books written about historical events. And so that would also mean that you basically couldn't deal with those. Because if you're trying to write a World War II RPG and you're trying to deal with issues that relate to World War II, do you think you're going to come up with any racist, homophobic, discriminatory, or repugnant views involved in World War II? Well, yeah, that's something that's going to happen. So this also prevents us from dealing with any type of real world issues. And one of the ways that we handle and process real world issues as a society is definitely through works of art and games. And so I would include RPGs as part of that, right? So this does seem extremely limiting to me. Yeah, good point. The Star Wars, Star Trek, the original series Star Trek wasn't real world. However, it dealt with real world issues in the storylines. Yeah, Sierra Seti says a rule forbidding real world political views would be extremely limiting and go against the spirit of speculative fiction overall. I agree. So the problem with banning real world anything is people will insist everything is a dog whistle. How do I know? Because they already do. The Nose Play says the real world stuff cannot be off limits. Are we allowed not to make stories in the real world? Is Wolfenstein racist? Exactly. I agree that doesn't work. You know, I thought about that, that the Book of Erotic Fantasy PDF is on drive-through. I thought later, hey, I wonder if there's some way to get it as a PDF. Maybe we do need to make that. I would want to dive into and find out more about the story behind that, because I thought I said incorrectly that it had the D20 logo on it, because I thought the whole thing was about the D20 logo. So maybe we just get it by PDF and look at that. Yeah, well, again, Robert says he was 19, so okay. But okay, Alderaan, the entire planet was destroyed. Yeah, including all of the kids. Yeah, well, right. And why McDougal says, who's to say what's a repugnant view? And why would you want to take that upon yourself to try to adjudicate that? If you're only adjudicating that, like I said, with one other person or two other people, like, for instance, if somebody comes to you with, you've got your particular world, and then somebody wants to make a movie, let's say, and you say, listen, okay, we can do, let's talk about doing this movie, but I've developed a certain type of brand, a certain type of story, things that this story does and things that does not do. I don't want anything that goes against that in this movie. You're talking about one other person and negotiate or other entity, right? And negotiating what is or cannot be in a script or something like that, like in a script, first of all, for a particular world. And that's fine, because then you can adjudicate that directly with the other person. When you're trying to do it in an open environment like this, it's next to impossible. Dancy had it right in your interview, the Nose Play says. Let the community police it with their dollars. If something breaches ethical grounds, maybe people won't support it and it will die. And if you're not putting the burden of policing it yourself on you, then you can also just say, and I'm not associated with it, which is what this did in the beginning. I'm not affiliated with it. It was published under an open license. And if you think it's bad, then you say, I condemn it. So I remembered something that Fate had said. So over here, Fate, this is Fate's licensing. We're coming up on an hour, but I thought this was an interesting, did I find, we said that Fate was one of the ones where you can use open the Creative Commons CCC BY or the 1.01 OGL. They license it under both terms. So you can use whichever one you like best and is most appropriate for your particular usage. So they license it under both. And they also have a Powered by Fate logo. And you can use the Powered by Fate logo. But I don't think you have to. But you can use the Powered by Fate logo. And they even provide some of the fonts as well. And then they tell you how to credit that. But there was something in it. There was something here that talked about, it said that you can't do something with their SRDs that basically impugn the honor. I want to say that was it, or is prejudicial or impugn the honor of Evil Hat. Okay. And so I thought that language, I think there are two issues with that. The first is, can you say, I'm going to license this under Creative Commons by under the following circumstances? And that seems to be no, because if the circumstances under which the license is given is told to you by the Creative Commons by license. And also the open game license, the OGL, tells you what the terms of the license are. So I don't think you're allowed to say, provided you adhere to these moral standards, I will license this material to you under CC BY. Because if the material is sitting there published and put out under CC BY, I don't think that you can say, oh no, there's something else over here on my website that is additionally restrictive. I don't think you can do that. But the sentence, I found it. It was difficult to find. But then I did find it, and now I can't. But their language someplace had to do with, well, you can't do anything with the SRDs that would be prejudicial or impugn the honor of Evil Hat. And I thought that, well, if you're doing that, if saying something like that, I had a more understanding of, because when you're writing some type of, a new book under this particular rule set, you're going forward. You're going forward. But what you don't want to happen, or what you don't want something that somebody writes going forward to come back in some way, backward and be prejudicial against the company that wrote it. So that was a very short statement, and I'm wondering what type of weight it has. But man, why can't I find this? Licensing Fate. I looked it up and, I remember this, and then I couldn't find it, and then I did find it, and now here I am trying to look up Licensing Fate again. License Fate, but I think I get back to that same page. Well, I can't find it. We've been going for about an hour anyway, but there was some other statement like that was trying to stop something from coming back to Evil Hat, and it wasn't. Of course, it wasn't. Nothing like what the Cypher System had written here was like that. Judy says, I'm at a loss for how anything could be written. Hey, Toxic Crumble. I'm glad you finally got to join in. I was late getting started today, so that may have been part of it. Trey says, I'm not sure their own horror setting, Stay Alive, conforms to their own morality clause. Is Stay Alive a Monty Cook game? Oh, it is. And it's with the Cypher System. Build an entire campaign battling Lovecraftian cults or surviving the zombie apocalypse. Run one-shots that pit the player against masked slashers, crawling xenomorphs, or sinister spirits. Or just get the most fun out of your Lich Queen and her minions in the lowest depths of your dungeon. It might not. Arguably, if you wrote this, it might be running afoul of the morality clause. That's interesting. Execute Order 66 as well. Viking Bockham says, good luck mixing different morality systems and finding the common denominator across all morality clauses. Nephanor says, the wording of morality clauses always tends to be vague and open to interpretation, which allows those who make them to have their own political beliefs protected, but attack those of the opposition. Innerlight says, I've always described morality clauses as the man, the boy, and the donkey Aesop's fable. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, Cal says, Mr. Dancy is a very smart and very good fellow. Yeah, and the more and more that whole situation went on, the more I respect what he did and what he created, what the business strategy that he executed and what he did for the community. The more and more I respect it. All right, let's see. So Sarah says, does the CC prevent mature content? I don't see it on the license statement for the recent CC release. No, I don't believe there is any type of license. Here, let's look that up. CC, Creative Commons, CC by 4. Here it is, and here is our human readable. Under the following terms, you are free to share, adapt, remix, transform, but you must provide attribution, as the licensor indicates, and you can put no additional restrictions. You may not apply legal terms or technological measures that restrict others from doing anything the license permits. There is nothing there about any type of morality here. So if we look over here at the actual license right here, we can see exactly what the license itself says. So this right here. So I'm not going to go through it, but adaptive material, like what are our headers? Adapters license, copyright in similar terms, effective technological measures, exceptions and limitations, licensed material, licensed rights. That's defining terms. License grant. The subject of the terms and conditions of this public license, the licensor hereby grants you a worldwide, royalty-free, non-sublicensable, non-exclusive, irrevocable license to exercise the licensed rights in the licensed material, to reproduce and share the licensed material in whole or in part, and reproduce the shared adapted material. Now, no endorsement. Nothing in this public license constitutes or may be construed as permission to assert or imply that you are, or that your use of the material, licensed material, is connected with, sponsored by, endorsed, or granted official status by the licensor or others designated to receive attribution as provided in Section 3. So there's that clause again that we think is so important. So if someone does something terrible that you want to distance yourself from, they cannot imply in any way that it's sponsored, endorsed, or granted official status by. You can say it's not. That was published under an open license, and I condemn it if you do condemn it. So that we do have moral rights, but that's different in this context. Moral rights, such as the right of integrity, are not licensed under this public license or made publicly, privately, or other similar personality rights. However, to the extent possible, the licensor waives and agrees not to assert any rights held by the licensor to the limited extent necessary to allow you to exercise the licensed rights. So moral rights in this context is not a morality clause. So here are our conditions. So attribution is the major condition. Well, that's it. So it's just Section 3 is license condition, attribution. So this is more information on exactly how you attribute, but it doesn't say anything that I'm seeing here about any type of morality. So that's a bit of confirmation. We can go through and read the whole thing, but that's a bit more confirmation that no, that's not something that's part of that. Let's see. Let's see what people are saying. Yeah, Robert says most don't need a morality clause because groups tend to gravitate towards similar morals. That seems like a good clause for non-endorsement. It did. That covered a few more things, not just endorsement, but it had a few other things in there. So I thought that was a good one too. Sarah says, I appreciate your walking through this. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I I guess this was a whole topic that that warranted a whole hour. So that's fine though. So we will talk about get back to productivity soon though. Maybe tomorrow with a little extra time. I'm not sure what our topic is going to be tomorrow because it would be great because people talked about how do we hold ourselves accountable. Some people, including me, would like other people are trying to get stuff done and would like other people to hold us accountable. And we can use the productivity section of the Raven Keep Discord for that. So we can, whatever we're trying to create, if we're trying to do certain things during the day, do we wake up? Do we hit our call to adventure? And then do we succeed in doing what we were supposed to do for that day? We can use the Raven Keep Discord to hold ourselves accountable. Post a link to that license. Oh, yep. So here is the full license right here. That's the Creative Commons 4.4 by legal code, not the human readable, but that's actually the license itself. All right. Well, I have enjoyed this conversation. I thought this was a good conversation to have and an important conversation to have. Thank you very much all for contributing to it. Let's go be productive for the rest of the day. I'm going to try to do some more writing, but really also grocery store, got to get groceries, got to prepare for the whole week to make sure that we are back on schedule next week. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for being here and grind on.